Good morning, everybody. Welcome to CosmoQuest Community Coffee for today, Monday, November 16th, in the year that still shall not be named. I am your host, Jillian Rhodes, and this is Space and Art and Astronomy. I apologize for the delay. The internet gods were not on our sides this morning. It's a Monday, things happen. But here you go, here we are. And so we're just gonna jump right into it. I am super excited for today's conversation. A couple weeks ago, you guys watched me run down a rabbit hole and investigate this random artist that I found referenced in an astronomy magazine. And here she is to talk to you about what we found that day. So this is Anna von Martens, and so welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you for reaching out to me.
Yeah, I was just gobsmacked by your work when we were looking around. There's just it's just very varied, and it was just really, really cool. So I basically saw it and I was like, okay, got to get this person on the show. Yeah. So just to kind of start, could you just give us a quick introduction, who you are and what you're working in?
Sure. Yes, I live here in the United States. I live in New Hampshire. I was based in California for a while, but my work primarily takes the form either of stitching, sort of this quilt structure where I use thread to kind of create these patterns, or I make drawings. And all of my work is based on, it often takes in these sets of data or sort of some kind of scientific phenomenon, and I integrate that and kind of see it through a different lens, see it through an artistic lens, and see how we might have a different relationship with that information.
Okay. Yeah, and that just brings me to mind that you had prepared something that you wanted to share, right? You have your slideshow.
Sure. So I have images. Yeah, I have images of a bunch of bodies of work, and we can look at it in different ways. I thought, and you can just I can just pull up some images, and then you can let me know if we want to pause on things.
We can. Yeah, definitely. No, I was just thinking that we can pull it up. You can kind of just pull it up so that as the discussion is going on, so that we can just have it there and ready. We ideally would have done this, beforehand, but we kind of got on and went straight into live mode. So it's going to be kind of a sausage, see how the sausages are being made on live. So that's why I was thinking, if you want to go ahead and pull it up.
Okay, great.
One of the things though I did want to ask you though, because you just referenced that, like bringing in the scientific data into your work. So how did that happen? Was that were you always interested in that, or was it something that you kind of started doing on later in your career?
Yeah, no, it has always been something that I have been interested in, because I like sort of like sinking into something that feels real and tangible in the world. So that idea of phenomena really inspires me. And then, like I said, we see it through an artistic lens. So yeah, I'll pull up some images, and let's see, and we'll see what I'm talking about. So I might start with an older body of work. We can come back to the project I did at the Radcliffe Institute. But this,
which is actually the one I wanted to, is that the art?
Oh, yay.
Yeah. Oh, as the stars go by. Okay. Yes. I was going to ask you about artifacts.
About artifacts. I can look at that, although it might make sense to talk about Henrietta Leavitt. Well, no, we can go to artifacts and see, because it's right here. And then there'll be a broader context for this work. So the project I did at the Radcliffe was about the life and work of Henrietta Leavitt. And Henrietta Leavitt worked at the turn of the 19th century, and she studied the stars. She studied these glass plate photographs of the night sky. And here's a drawing I made of one of those glass plates. And she, in her studying of the stars and simply trying to determine the magnitude of the stars, discovered and identified a lot of Cepheid variable stars, these stars that pulse, have a regular cycle of pulsing from dim to bright and dim again. And she established this relationship between how long a variable star takes to pulse and how intrinsically bright it is. And because there was this relationship, astronomers could immediately put that to use. And if they found a Cepheid variable, they could see how bright it was, plug it into her relationship, and then find out how bright it should be, and therefore
Right.
how much distance is causing light to dim. So just quick review of what she did. But it was this foundational tool. It really shifted a two-dimensional world and created a three-dimensional universe. And
Yeah.
so I highlighted this glass plate in particular in the Harvard College Observatory collection because it's taken in 1934, and it has both, of course, the small and large Magellanic Clouds, but also this bright star, Achernar. And here are these three objects. Again, this drawing of this plate that I did. And what I wanted to emphasize is that Henrietta Leavitt studied glass plates like this, these tiny black, each tiny black dot representing a star, a very two-dimensional surface. And through her finding, we could now imagine these three primary objects on this plate in three-dimensional space. So just again, a mental shift. And as an artist, it's also too, we think two-dimensionally and then as three-dimensional volumes. So it's this interesting correlation.
Yeah,
but what fascinated me about, go ahead. Yes, please interrupt.
I was just gonna ask you about like Henrietta Leavitt. Like, were you already interested in her work as an astronomer? Like, how did you pick her? Like, how did that come about that you decided to work on her plate?
Yes, yeah. And no, I am not, an astronomy historian. So I had actually, somewhat horrifically never heard of her name. And it was only through the glass plate collection that I found her story. So again, as an artist, for me, it's really interesting that these objects, right, these glass plates were what these objects led me to her story. And then I feel like I'm now on a campaign of like, well, gosh darn it, everyone should know Henrietta Leavitt's name. It should be a household name. And so that really is the mission of the project I did. And again, this drawing series, Artifacts, is an offshoot of that project. But, Edwin Hubble is a household name. And Edwin Hubble, for example, really used Henrietta Leavitt's work as the tool to make his discoveries. So I really do want her name just to be like sung from the hilltops.
Right.
But yeah, no, yeah.
So when you're talking about artifacts,
go ahead.
No, I just like, what do you mean by artifacts?
Right. So as you can see at the edge of this drawing representing the plate, at the edge, you can see this real warping. So an artifact is like, because starlight is hitting the telescope's lens and then hitting the emulsion on the glass plate, the lens itself creates a warping of the starlight and produces these artifacts, these sort of strange phenomena. And they were so strange that I decided to magnify sections of the glass plate and make these drawings. And I call them, it populates, like it becomes these like dragonflies and insects and weird like creatures. So each one of these is actually a star, and you can see at the edge, it's quite warped. So it no longer represents like accurate data. And it did crack me up. Some astronomers I've shown this to, they're like, you're showing like a fault in the technology itself, right? And this is at the very edge, so that it's not accurate information. But I think that's also interesting that both artists and scientists have to really think about how they perceive things and think about ways of seeing. So just like artists need to be aware of these particular ways we might see and how we might see differently, scientists, it's the same. It's the part of this drawing series is just highlighting this way of seeing, that we are choosing different ways of seeing.
Right.
But really, here's another different magnified section of the plate. So Achernar is really in this strange, like sort of black fireball. And here's the small, and a magnified section of the small Magellanic Cloud. So it really is, what I also wanted to do with this drawing series was honor the life that Henrietta Leavitt spent sitting and looking. Like, she really honed these perception skills that were, and then really that's why they were called computers back in the time. Like, her brain could really organize and hold this information. So her deep perception and noticing, and then also calculating and making these discoveries, just that sit of really paying attention. So this drawing series was really about paying attention, just in the same way that Henrietta Leavitt paid such exquisite attention to the stars.
And that's kind of, so while you were at the Radcliffe Institute, you were also working in collaboration with some astronomers there at the same time, right? I think that's what led to the astronomy magazine mention, which led me to you in the first place.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So I'll come through the images here. We're just going to take a step back in time. So part of this project I did on Henrietta Leavitt had these stitches. These are particular. So I'll come to your question. I'll just quickly talk about this.
No worries,
this piece.
no worries, no worries, no worries.
Because Henrietta Leavitt. Yeah. Okay. Good. We can come in and out of it. But a lot of my work takes this stitched format. And João Alves, who was a Radcliffe Fellow there in residence, he and I just started conversations. He was compiling all this data that was from the Gaia satellite and using like a billion stars in our Milky Way. This new data was coming through, and he was seeing ways that he could understand and process that data. And as I was I'm trying to think, there's so much to come out. So I'll just come to his discovery and we can come back to this project. But so I often do these stitches here. These are star trails, and they're actually the stars on the morning of Henrietta's birth, and then the star trails on the evening of her death, above the place of her birth and the place of her death. So this was a diptych of sort of this birth and death, and then in between these two stitched panels are her life is held in between. And so João was accumulating this data. Essentially, I'll get to the punchline, like he, discovered along with his team at the Radcliffe, this Radcliffe wave is what he calls it. And he linked gas filaments and stellar nurseries into this enormous structure, this sort of wave that crosses the galactic plane and sinks beneath it. But it's 9,000 light years, it's just the largest coherent structure in the Milky Way. And it was discovered, and he and I just like right away hit it off, and we just talked about what I've sort of mentioned, like how scientists and artists have this similar way of seeing how we need to see things from all different angles to understand it. So for him to link these disparate elements that were previously thought to be disparate, like for him to structurally link them, was this new kind of way of seeing, and he calls it a galactic stitch. So he was thinking about my work, and as he was linking these objects, he was like, they sort of found this ramp, and then he's like, wait, the ramp is an arc, and then to even look, because it's at such a scale, to like look deeper, he's like, I think it's a stitch. And so he was sort of thinking about these new kinds of structure in our galaxy. So yeah, again, it wasn't like, he would have found, it on his own, but he talks about coming to the Radcliffe and seeing differently. So that was a really fun conversation between the two of us.
That's awesome. Cool. So did you want to talk more about this exhibition, the measured?
Yeah, I will talk, and I'll go up to the top. It just is really fun to see some images too. So as I said, these are some glass plates that are in sleeves housed at the Harvard College Observatory. There's 500,000 glass plates there. So these objects are what brought me to Henrietta Leavitt's story. And what also drew me immediately to the story, it was women that Edward Pickering pictured here, that he hired to study the glass plates. And so, and it was considered a quote unquote women's work, this sort of very repetitive, tedious sort of calculating and repeating and calculating and repeating. And so it was sort of thought, the women will make these calculations, and then future, men will make discoveries. But of course, these women were like, oh no, we'll be doing the calculating and the discovery making. So they went on to make discoveries in their own right, just analyzing this data. And here's Henrietta Leavitt herself in 1912. So as I said, she discovered, just highlighting these ways that she would work. So here's like a magnitude sequence of stars that she's labeling as she can write in ink on these glass plates on the reverse side. And here is this, the famous plate of Edwin Hubble, who is a household name, and he's identifying one of those Cepheid stars in the Andromeda galaxy, but it was called a nebula at the time. And because of Henrietta Leavitt's relationship, he could calculate how far away that star was and said, hey, this is like outside the scope of our Milky Way. Therefore, Andromeda is its own galaxy in its own right. So, but the key here is that this is taken in 1923, this discovery. And what was so sort of heartbreaking to me is that Henrietta Leavitt died of cancer in 1921. So she dedicated her life work to making this discovery, and then to know that like the discoveries that sort of cascaded forward just in a decade after her death were so profound, and it gave us this new way of seeing. So in some ways I wanted to make a memorial to her life and work, but I also wanted to really honor, as I said, that work that she did in her own life. That tribe of women, the Harvard computers, they were so deeply connected and committed to the work. And they really built meaning there. So of course, while I'm grateful we're all, can express gratitude for the discovery that she provided, I also like to think that the meaning was really held in her own life as well. Yeah. And as I said, I use, and just to be clear, like what and how I get these stitched star trails, which what I do is I have this star calculation software. And so I went latitude and longitude to the place of her birth, look at the sky overhead, and I can just play time forward. So each star I would chalk out like a star trail passing, and the brighter stars would, have a longer trail as this rising sun would sort of burn out the dimmer stars, and then I would have my own grayscale here, and like this image I showed before, I would stitch these star trails of the different stars sort of burning out with the rising sun, and then returning on the place of her death. So yeah, that was this this project here. And then I can quickly talk about this drawing that I made for that, is that how Henrietta Leavitt would discover these variable stars, which she would superimpose the same area of the night sky, but at different times, a positive over a negative, and then you get a little halo of light because it would be in a different cycle. So it would be a brighter star, and that halo would show, oh wait, this is a variable star that has a different brightness over time. So again, just honoring her, and the fact that she could look at a glass plate and hold that information in her mind, and then look at another glass plate and think, oh, that dot I think is slightly at a different scale, and therefore let me check this out and see if it's a variable. Really amazing. So I wanted, again, through my own drawing, that act of paying attention, honoring what she was so amazing at.
That's very cool. It's interesting. The work is kind of it's really tied to a history and a culture, and I think those are the two series that I also asked you about, that I thought were just really fascinating, are very much also tied to that sense of like, this is a culture, this is a history, that it's not just like a picture of something, but it's something that's tied into a time and a context. And so there was this two that I thought of, the As the Stars Go By and Look to the Heavens. So maybe we could talk about those for a little bit.
Yeah, that is, I would love to. So I'll skip down there to the As the Stars Go By series. And this was the first time I ever stitched star trails into these fabric panels. And with the Radcliffe project, it was very, celebrating this specific astronomical discovery. But here with As the Stars Go By, it's almost the opposite, that I'm honoring in some ways the disconnection between the consistent cycle of the stars and these events on Earth. So what I did was show the stars traveling above violent moments in American history. So I would go to these specific sites and times. So here in Christopher Columbus's journal, he actually marks the latitude and longitude when he first, and the moment he first sights land. So I go to that latitude and longitude, go to that, go to 1492 and play time. And so these are the stars that Christopher Columbus saw when he first sighted land. And it's interesting here, one, they would actually be a navigational tool. So there is like a relevance there, but it becomes this kind of starscape, almost a landscape, this point of view over these specific moments in time. But here, this is a moment at the Tet Offensive during the Vietnam War. And then as the Americans started bombing Baghdad during the Second Iraqi War. So these moments in time where there's violence below, but it's almost this strange like comfort in the consistent passage of stars.
Right, because you
Here,
can't
Martin
see any
Luther,
of that. Like,
and I, oh,
I was,
right, right, you can't even see. Oh, it says, okay, am I back on? I think I might have froze for a moment.
yes, yes, you froze for a moment,
Am
but
I back? Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes.
So here, like, these are the stars when Martin Luther King was shot, that the hour that passed between he was shot and pronounced dead, it's from the Lorraine Motel looking in the direction the shots were fired. So it's this idea that there is a sort of comfort that such horrific things can be happening on Earth, and there is this consistency in the stars. But it also really is a memorial to these events, that it is a specific point of view, and it's kind of citing you in that time and place, and a more visceral connection to these things that have occurred in American history.
Right. Okay. And look to the heavens, if I recall. Sorry, if you had more to say on As the Stars Go By, but the look to the heavens.
No, right. And I'll just take.
Go ahead.
Right. So look to the heavens, which is, here's an image here. And I'll just go to the detail because it's probably hard to see on the screen. But instead of the disconnect between, astronomical events and historical events on Earth, these connect the two. So this is really where we're looking at the heavens, and our cultural beliefs influence what we see. So this is the evening that Galileo first spied Jupiter's moon. So this brighter tract here that you can hopefully see is Jupiter itself rising in the night sky.
Cool.
And then of course, Galileo was condemned as a heretic for this finding. So it's interesting how we load something that is a pure, observation, that can be judged in a different way. So Look to the Heavens was really about this complicated relationship between humans and astronomy. Okay, am I back or frozen again? It sounds like
you've just been coming in and out a little bit. I wonder. Yes, but I think for my audio has been coming through okay. It was just lagging a little bit at the end of it.
I think just thinking about going back to that idea of João and I talking about how artists and scientists see, and so thinking about Galileo, that here ultimately he is just seeing, but we often can put filters on what we see and not sort of be willing to see, or might be so fixed on this is how one sees, to not see a different picture. So it's interesting to me in that way how art and science blends that action.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. And then I think there's definitely the one I think that I have to ask you is perhaps the weirdest, I don't know, the most like nebulous of the projects that I saw, which is the shape/view. So I didn't do my research very well, but just the shapes of them are so interesting. And they're textiles, but it's so can you talk a little bit about that series?
Yeah, so that is a fun series. So here they are, these funky shapes. And
yes,
so
those funky shapes.
Yes, this was based on a contemporary finding. So just within the last decade, that there's this idea, if you subtract the expansion of our universe, what's revealed is this, the largest known structure in the cosmos, these superclusters. And that is how galaxies, sort of flow together. So our supercluster contains 100,000 galaxies, and at the center of our supercluster is this basin of attraction. So these lines, if you can see them, are actually what the gravitational flow of a galaxy would be. So we're way out on a limb here on this one. But these funky shapes are actually just rotated views of the same structure, our supercluster. And what's fascinating to me, I was very attracted to it as an artist because it's sort of like you have this like ball of clay that you can kind of like shape and look at and rotate. And then you can see, oh, my internet is, oh, maybe it doesn't pay to be an artist in New Hampshire with unstable internet, but hopefully I'm back. And you can
your
see
audio is here at least. I don't know.
Good. Okay,
I don't know about your video, but your audio is coming through.
Okay, good. So so it really is interesting to me, this fun three-dimensional form that I could kind of play with. And again, going back to this way of like needing to see things from a different point of view. But then this imagery is so seductive. So one, it's on a scale that I can't even begin to fathom. So it's just the vastness of it is extraordinary. But then as imagery, it connects to sort of neural passageways. It feels very like centered in the body. And then at the scale and with the hand stitching, it connects to the body again. So there is this way, again, that I'm almost taking this external data and then scale. And I think that with cosmology, that is one of those fun plays, where our minds sort of travel outside of ourselves and then back to our point of view. And it gives us a perspective. It gives us a we are in the world.
Yeah. And then how did you find these images? Were these like images that you took, or that like how did you figure out the scale, like, and they're the same view but rotated? Is it like where did you get that data from?
Right. In some bodies of work, I've contacted the lead author of a study and worked with them more directly. And with this one, what I was kind of interested in is that the volume of data is so the condensing of so much data is overwhelming that I kind of actually decided to go on the other end of it. So this literally like a video of a 3D diagram pulled off the web that I treated this very much like gesturally. So I would really make these gesture drawings out of chalk on the fabric. So in some ways it's somewhat criminal from a scientific point of view that I translated the data, like it's such precise data that I then translate very loosely.
Right.
But I think that is also an interesting push and pull of how do we digest data? How do we sort of see things abstractly, loosely? How do we get very specific and precise and sort of play with that? So this is a very loose gestural interpretation.
Yeah, a couple of people from the chat who are watching were remarking that it looks like a liver or a lung, with like the trails being like veins and arteries and stuff.
Oh my God, that is so true. And I actually did, years ago, a piece on the liver and how we ingest, sort of that metaphor of ingesting information and then digesting and then filtering. And I totally agree with those comments. There is this way, this kind of internal connection and digestion that I could see. Oh, that's really fun.
Yeah, cool. And so is there anything else that I've missed on the images that you want to show?
No, I think we covered, we definitely touched on the bodies of works that I wanted to talk about. So
Cool.
no, it feels really good. And hopefully the images, again, like thinking of these details, I'm just making one more parallel between artists and scientists, that both artists and scientists need to have these big abstract concepts and sort of stay open and in this imaginative space. But then scientists and artists both really need to like do a lot of work. So if you think of like the Radcliffe wave discovery, like the amount of calculations and data coming from the Gaia satellite on the position and location of these stars, the amount of number crunching that Henrietta Leavitt had to do. So there's real work, there's real nitty gritty work. as you can see in this image in particular, mine, there is this real execution of work, but then there's also these beautiful, open, broad concepts. So I really like that play between sort of the abstract and the specific, and and just the nitty gritty of getting the work done.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned that multiple times, the art and the science and how they influence each other, and is that's something that's obviously really important to you in your work. So, maybe we could just talk a little bit about that. Like why do you think it's so important, and is it something that you kind of advocate for, or is it something that you just kind of believe in your own work? Like, it's interesting, but it's not necessarily like a common crossover, especially these days. And for most people are not thinking of like, oh, science and art, though, yes, they go together.
Right. And I suppose I am like, yeah, I'm a pretty hardcore advocate about it, because to me, I mean, one, they are such parallel paths. But as I mentioned, this way of working, Hills, it feels very connected. But it also, I think that there's a way that, again, these ways of seeing can be so validated. So I think art might seem as non-essential, or just this extra, but there's also these ways that it connects to these deep themes of these existential ways of being, and also these ways of seeing. So that sometimes, as Joao kindly credited, it's like you have to step back from the data and be willing to see this larger picture and to make connections. So I think art and science can really speak to each other, that there is a poetic nature of science that is actually functions. It's not just like a pretty decorative, but there is a beauty and a function and a poetry in science that is real. And then in art, there's also these ways that we speak to these deeply human ways of being. So there's these real essential qualities that can weave together. That's not just that one is, fact and the other is fiction, or one is essential and the other is just extra embellishment, that they really are integrated in this essential kind of way.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. And so what are you working on now? What's next? What are you working on? What's coming? And if people want to follow your work, where can they go to find you?
Oh, great. Oh, great. Well, it's what I'm working on now, which maybe on a global scale is like, everyone's like, yep, I get it. So I'm like, very broadly, I'm looking at darkness. That these are dark times that we're going through. And I suppose, like an artist, like that there are ways that you can both think of that very abstractly. So I'm working with an image actually that Joao Alves provided me, that is this dust map sort of structure, but I'm also interested in the blackness, like what is in those spaces where there isn't any visual observation. So that, of course, is taken me into dark matter, and I'm working on a Smithsonian fellowship to maybe study dark matter and see how I'm interested as an artist, how the unknown and the non-visible can inform what we do know. So it's an interesting, like, this idea that darkness might be essential, like, and the unknown might be essential. Anyway, so as you can tell, I'm in this very artistic mode, much more abstractly thinking about these concepts, and then it will get real and structural. But I'm interested in having lived, we're all living through this very dark time, how that can inform the light. So this relationship between lightness and darkness, in a very specific, real way, but also existentially.
Very cool.
Oh, and then I realized you asked me, and then in terms of where you can find me, it's the easiest if you just know how to spell my name. I'm on Instagram there with that handle, but also I have a website, just that is my name, AnnaVonMertens.com. So that's probably the easiest way to find me.
Okay, great. I'll just put that link in the spelling in the chat so people know. Well, it's just so cool. I just love this work, and it's interesting because the textile, the textiles and the stitching and the kind of the materiality of it, I think, is quite interesting. That it's not just a picture of something, but it's something that's like has the stitching and the weight and the kind of it's 2D, but it's also 3D at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And now thinking back to Henrietta Leavitt's story, those glass plates, those objects helped me find my path to her story. And so that's partly I want to have these be objects, to have a weight, have them be these things that maybe can carry its own story forward.
Right. Awesome. Well, cool, Anna. This has just been really amazing. So thank you so much for being here and for talking to me about all this stuff. It's just been fascinating.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. It's and yes, I love it when the arts and sciences do intersect. So it's so nice to be here as part of a program that does forges those connections.
Yeah, well, I do. I've been doing this program for a few months, and every week I still find new ways that the work intersects and new artists that are doing things. So it's been very cool. Um, Anna, you're free to go if you want. I'm just going to round up here, but I've seen some bits come through. Um, basically this is on Twitch and people can like send bits for appreciators, and so I owe them a happy dance every time they send bits. So that was for Keeper of Maps. Thank you for the bits, and for the way it goes sent bits as well, and MNJKMR3377 also followed. So thank you so much for the follows. So awesome. Thank you guys. Basically this, Tropical Tom also sent bits. Oh my gosh, I'm running out of happy dances. We're going into Bollywood here. Um, so thank you guys so much. This show is brought to you by you. CosmoQuest is a product of the Planetary Science Institute. Um, we have broadcasts and programs all week long. The next coming up is the Daily Space in a couple hours for your science news roundup. I think there's a Daily Space today. Oh no, it's no. So there's no Daily Space today because it's Monday, but there will be tomorrow. And we have podcasts, Astronomy Cast, Weekly Space Hangout, all this kind of stuff. So make sure that you follow and stay in touch. And check the links in the chat for how you can get involved with us on Discord, social, and support us so that we can keep this going. And I will be back next Monday. I don't know what I'll be doing yet, but it will be something to do with astronomy and art. So we will see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.